Welcome to this lesson on finding the distance on a coordinate plane. Please make sure you have these notes in front of you so we can begin our lesson. The learning objective for today says I can find the distance between points using coordinates and absolute value. So for our key concepts, let's go ahead and talk about two different types of lines. The first type of line we're going to talk about is horizontal lines. So let's zoom in. Now horizontal lines are lines that go from left to right. So on a coordinate plane, I can plot two different points and draw a line connecting them. So for example, let's go ahead and pick some points. So for point A, let's call it 3, 3. And for point B, let's call it -4, 3. So let's go ahead and plot point A on the grid. So this is the location of point A. And this is the location of point B. We can go ahead and connect these two vertices, or these 2 points, to make a horizontal line. So now let's go ahead and figure out the distance between point A and point B. One method is you can go ahead and count the amount of boxes that it takes you to get from point A to point B. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I can say that the distance from point A to point B is 7 units long. But if we're not given a graph, what we can do is we can take a look at our coordinates. Now let's take a look at our coordinates down here. We have point A and we have point B. Notice that the y coordinates are both the same. So if the y coordinates are both the same, I'm going to ignore them for now. So anytime that your y coordinates are the same, we have horizontal lines. Now sometimes we're not going to be given a grid to figure out the distance between 2 points, and that's the reason why we're going to use the absolute value formula down here. Basically, I'm going to take the coordinates that we're and I'm going to subtract them and take the absolute value of them. So essentially, I will take the absolute value of 3 minus -4. And that would give me the distance between the 2 points. So one more thing we should talk about is anytime that you have two negatives next to each other, what they're going to do is they're going to basically cancel each other out by fighting, and it becomes, the two negatives becomes positive. So now let's talk about some vertical lines. Vertical lines are lines that go up and down. So let's go ahead and pick some points and plot them on the grid. So for point C, we're going to use 1, 3, and for point D, we're going to use 1, -2. So on the coordinate plane, this is the location of point C, and this is the location of point D. What I can do is I can connect these two coordinates with a solid line and make a vertical line. I could find the distance between point C to D by counting the spaces in between. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there are 5 units to get from point C to D. So now let's take a look at the coordinates, because sometimes we're not given a coordinate plane to count. So we've got coordinates point here, C, and coordinate for point D there. If we notice, the x coordinates are now the same, so I'm going to cross them out, and in my absolute value formula I'm going to use the points that are not the same, which is 3 and -2. So I'm going to put 3 in this first spot and -2 in the second spot. Notice that there are two negatives next to each other, so I can go ahead and basically cross them out or cancel each other out, and they become positives. So let's go ahead and use these key concepts to discuss the following examples. So I want to insert a quick slide right here and talk about something called zero pairs. Zero pairs basically say a positive number and a negative number can cross each other out to make 0. So I can have this problem right here. I can say 3, or positive 3, and I can say -2. Well, 3 minus 2, we all know, is equal to 1. But this is what it looks like. Here's 3 positives, and here are 2 negatives. Well, this positive and this negative will cross each other out, and this positive and this negative will cross each other out. And notice I have 1 positive left, which is why my answer was positive 1. Let's try another one. What if I had -3 and -2? Well, I can draw is 3 negative signs and 2 negative signs. Notice there are no plus signs to cross out, so my final answer has to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There are 5 negatives, so my final answer would be -5. So let's use this to help us solve the following examples. For example, when it says Taylor's house and school are each shown on the map, what is the distance between the 2 points? So the first thing we should do is identify the location of Taylor's house. So let's use T for Taylor, and her location is at 5, 3. Now let's take a look at the location of the school. The school, let's represent by S, is located at 2, 3. So now that we're given these 2 points, take a look at the X coordinates. Those are different. But the Y coordinates are the same, so I'm going to ignore the Y coordinates for now. And I'm going to plug this information into that formula that I showed you on the key concepts. We're going to take the absolute value and subtract the 2 numbers that we're going to use, which is the X coordinates. So let's take 5 and subtract it by 2. So let's take the absolute value of 5 minus 2, which is 3, and the absolute value of 3 is just 3. So the distance from Taylor's house to the school is 3 units away, or 3 units long. Another way that you can look at it is you can connect a horizontal line from the school to Taylor's house, and you can jump 1, 2, 3 spaces. So it's 3 units from Taylor's house to the school. For example 2, it says find the distance between point A and point B on the coordinate plane. So one thing I can do is I can go ahead and connect my 2 points with a vertical line. And I can go ahead and count the spaces in between A to B. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we have 7 units between point A to B. However, what happens if we're not given a graph to count? The first thing we want to do is we want to identify the coordinates. So point A is located at -2, 3, and point B is located at -2, -4. So now let's take a look at what we have in common. The X coordinates are both the same, so I can go ahead and ignore that for now. And I want to just focus in on the Y coordinates. So in my absolute value formula, I'm going to take the absolute value and subtract 2 numbers. The 2 numbers I'm going to subtract would be 3 minus -4. So here's a little trick. Anytime you have 2 negatives next to each other, the 2 negatives are going to fight and they're going to become positive. So now we're going to rewrite this problem. It's going to say 3 plus 4. Now when we take the absolute value of 3 plus 4, we get the absolute value of 7. And the absolute value of 7 is just equal to 7. Notice that's the same exact answer that we got by counting. So pause the video, complete the got it problem, and we'll discuss the answer in class tomorrow. Notice there are 2 got it problems on this slide, got it problem A and got it problem B. So for example 3, it says find the distance between the 2 points, point P, which is at 4, 4, and point Q, which is at 4, 1. So the difference is now that they're not giving us a grid to graph our points on. So what we're going to have to rely on is using the coordinates to get that done. So let's take a look at this. Notice that the X coordinates are the same, so I'm going to ignore the X coordinates. And I'm going to subtract, take the absolute value and subtract 4 minus 1. So 4 minus 1 and the absolute value sign becomes 3. And the absolute value of 3 is just equal to 3. So the distance between P and Q is 3 units. For example 4, it says find the distance between the 2 points. So point G is 1, -2, and point H is 3, -2. I'm going to look at the coordinates that have the same numbers. So the Y's both have -2, so I'm going to ignore that. And in the absolute value formula, I'm going to take 1 minus 3. So now that we're dealing with positive and negative numbers, I'm going to show you a little trick to get the correct answer when we're dealing with positive and negative numbers. Right here, I'm given 1 positive number, so I'm going to draw 1 plus for that. Now here, I'm giving 3 negative numbers, so I'm going to draw 3 negative signs. What I can do is, we can make 0 pairs out of these. So if a negative and a positive match up with each other, then they're going to cross each other out. The thing that I have left here would be my answer. So I have two negatives left. So in the absolute value box, 1 minus 3 is actually equal to negative 2. And the absolute value of negative 2 is just equal to 2 because it's 2 spaces away from 0. So point G and H are 2 units away from each other. Example 5, it says find the distance between the 2 points, point K and point L. So let's take a look at the items that we have in common. The x coordinates are both in common, so I'm going to ignore that in this case. And I'm going to use my absolute value formula to figure out this answer. In the first spot, I'm going to take negative 4. And in the second spot, I'm going to put negative 2. Alright, so notice I've got a negative 4 in this first box right here. And in the second box, I have a negative 2 if I take that sign with it. So what I want to do first is I want to draw 4 negative signs because that indicates the first value here. And then I'm going to put 2 more negative signs because I have 2 more negatives right next to it. Now what I can do is I can't cross anything out because there's no plus signs to cross it out. So what I can do is I can just count up how many negative signs I have. And I have 6 negative signs. So negative 4 minus 2 is equal to negative 6 because I have 6 of these negative signs. Now take the absolute value of negative 6, which is equal to 6 because it's equal to 6 spaces away from 0. So point K and L are 6 units apart. For example 6, it says find the distance between the 2 points. We've got point C and point D. Let's take a look at the coordinates that are the same. Right now we've got the x coordinates that are the same because we've got negative 2 here and negative 2 here. So I'm going to go ahead and place the other coordinates inside, or the coordinates for the y-axis inside of the absolute value formula. So I'm going to place negative 4 here, and I'm going to subtract it from negative 1. So the thing that I want to look at is I have 2 negatives standing next to each other, so these 2 negatives are going to fight. So it actually becomes the absolute value of negative 4 plus 1. So now we can go ahead and take a look at this. Well, I have 4 negatives here, so I'm going to draw 4 of negatives. And then I have 1 positive. I'm going to draw a positive sign here. I can cross out a negative and a positive because those are 0 pairs. And the amount that I have left would be negative 3 because there are 3 negative signs left. And the absolute value of negative 3 is just equal to 3. So point C and D are 3 units apart. So pause the video and complete these Got It problems, and we'll discuss the answer in class tomorrow. Notice I have 3 Got It problems on this slide. Got It problems C, D, and E. So now that we've completed this lesson, go ahead and self-rate yourself and let us know how you feel. If there's any part of this lesson that you do not understand, please go back and watch it again. Also, come to class with some questions so we can discuss it in further detail.